Hello, everyone. I am Jason Curtis, and I'll be your moderator and host for today. I'm a software engineer primarily. I run a consultancy with my wife called Option Zero, and together we also run Terra.do's course on software for climate, which helps people understand the intersection between software and climate. Great for software, designed for software engineers as well as for other folks like PMs of all stripes who are and designers who are looking to deepen their knowledge and their connection to software and climate intersection. Today, I have three awesome guests who have recently been through Terra.do courses and made the transition into climate roles, who we'll introduce in a minute, but we have them spotlighted right now. First, an ask for you all, if you can turn on your videos, that is really helpful for us. If you can't, that is totally fine, but I just prefer talking to boxes with faces in them than boxes with names in them. And then also throughout this call, we have 35 people here, which is a little heavy for just like the jump in and start talking type conversation. So we do have the Q&A tool turned on. We have the chat turned on. This session is really for you all. So if you have any questions that you want to ask these folks or myself, put it in the Q&A tool. You can vote up there or put it in the chat. And we are here to let you ask anything. And I'm going to start with some questions for our panelists, also just to get them to get you familiar with who they are. And then we'll start to mix in questions that you all have. Again, thanks for coming, and let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with Ben. I'm going to ask each of you to briefly share how your Terra.do journey started and what led you to where you are today, and where are you today?
Yeah, thanks for having me and inviting me. I really enjoyed the Terra.do classes that I took. I had been looking to kind of move in towards the climate and energy space for a little while, with a background in sports data and analytics on the data science and product management side. And I was looking around for ways to learn more about the industry and develop some expertise. And some of the courses were very general, like crash course in all of climate, and that felt a little too broad for me and not exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted to specialize a little bit more. And so I first took actually a carbon accounting course, and then found my way to the climate software course. And so really enjoyed them. Building actual portfolio, getting hands-on, doing projects with the data and writing code, so that it became something that I could put on my resume to show that I was serious about this, and I could learn a little bit in the process. And I think that helped me kind of in my journey into the energy space, where I'm now with Oracle Utilities, what used to be Opower, as a separate company before it was bought by Oracle several years back, and working as a product manager on the data side, the data platform team, and also with the solar and DER area more recently. So I've been here for just over 6 months now.
If folks aren't familiar with Opower, it was one of the first like really sort of making a splash software companies in climate tech that I remember, because they had a novel, really clever behavioral approach to helping people, encouraging people to save energy just by showing you your energy performance compared to your neighbors. So one of 1 million different things that can be done to further climate progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Kara.
Sure, Jason, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be part of this panel. So I came from a background in software originally in my career, and then moved into engineering leadership, and then roles in product management and technical program management in startups and big companies. So once I decided that I was committed to working in climate, I looked around and tried to figure out like how am I going to take on this space, how am I going to orient myself here,
And about when was that?
oh, that was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago.
Not long ago.
Yeah, so it was over, I guess, last spring of a year and a half ago-ish is I think when I was in your class, which is the first class I took with Terra. I looked around and again, I thought, well, there's classes that are very broad kind of learning, but I am a person who likes to build things. I like to make things. I like to do projects. I was actually the projects page, the portfolio of projects that people had done previously that I saw. And I was like, oh, these look really interesting. This is going to be a really interesting class. And that is exactly what I found it to be. It was great to explore with other people, get feedback, discover all the publicly available data sources. That was just an incredible bit of learning for me. And build a thing, do a project, and see how get a better understanding of frameworks for how software fits into climate. I did subsequently then, and I enjoyed the class so much I couldn't get enough. I signed up for Terra's Learning for Action 12-week program. That gave me a survey of different areas, and from that I honed in on. I did want to work on the electrical grid. It's very software centric. It's ready to scale. Seemed like that would be a good fit for me. Intrinsically interesting because it's electricity is around you all the time, and you really know when it doesn't work. And so that helped me guide me to find my role at Tapestry, which is X's moonshot for the electrical grid.
And
I joined Tapestry last November.
And can you be a little more specific? What's Tapestry unlocking or hoping to unlock?
Sure. So Tapestry builds products. So one way to think of it is this is an alphabet company. It's my third sojourn in an alphabet company. So you can think of it as making the grid visible, or like Google Maps for the grid. So one of the things that is a really common theme, I think, is the quality of data. So knowing what you have. So we have elements of building better grid models, knowing what assets exist, what their capabilities are, where they are, what their maintenance status is, and then building AI-driven models for analyzing what can go wrong, planning for the future, and identifying where to target investment and where renewables can be brought onto the grid. And so we work in both the distribution and transmission areas. I focus in distribution.
That has been just such a huge thing, and it's a very good application for software because the transmission and distribution grid, many of you are aware, needs to expand dramatically and become dramatically more flexible. And on its own, it's something that has, I think I would be probably underestimating if I said 1 million components. So it's something that you need to do 1 million different things, even just within that. And so it's a great place to have software, to be doing software well, especially since the status quo is very manual and slow and has been.
Yeah, it's a great example of one of the frameworks, I think, Jason, that you brought up in the class, like bits versus atoms, like working in climate. Ultimately, in software, you're working with bits, but at some point it gets down to atoms. And so we have the electrical grid that we have, and we have the electrical grid that we're going to build. But in the end, we have to work with existing infrastructure as well as new technology. So that's a challenge and a complexity that, it's a complexity and an opportunity to bring both new technology and existing infrastructure together.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, David, you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Happy to be chatting with you all today. So I've been a software engineer for a bit over a decade now, working in a bunch of different domains. I worked with startups for several years, working as part of a startup studio. So got to play around in several different domains there. Then spent some time.
Which studio was that?
It's called Coplex.
Okay.
It's a smaller studio based in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, but that was a lot of fun. And then I moved to New Relic, working on software observability. Did that for several years. And let's see, towards the end of last year, got hit by the tech layoffs, and that gave me a chance to kind of reflect and think about where I wanted to take my software career. I really enjoy software engineering. I wanted to keep doing it, but I wasn't feeling kind of super inspired with some of the work I had been doing, and so started to look for domains where I felt like I could have a bigger impact, and started looking into climate solutions, and happened upon the Software for Climate course, And I was like, this sounds like exactly what I'm looking for right now. Like, I'm totally new to climate. I don't know much about it. I just know we have problems, and I would love to work on something to help address them. So I was in the cohort of the class that started in February this year. So really enjoyed that. Got, you know, a great set of foundational knowledge of, you know, some of the types of software that go into climate solutions, like what are actually solutions and what problems we're trying to address with them. And then I got a new role in May this year at a company called Topanga, and they work in the food service industry. So we have two primary products. One is a reusable container program, and then the product that I'm primarily working on right now is a smart scale for commercial kitchens. Our primary clients are colleges and universities, so essentially they're dining halls. We're working with them to implement a scale. It's kind of a regular kitchen scale, but it has a camera kind of on an arm that sits above it and scans whatever food is being weighed. And that gets sent up to our cloud, and we're able to track. Currently, we're tracking food waste. So at the end of the day, the kitchens will measure how much food they have left over, and they're able to essentially tally up, you know, how much overproduction they had, how much food they're having to throw away. And we're working on expanding that right now to kind of track the full production cycle. So you can also measure at the start of the day how much you've prepared. And if you have leftovers that you are able to carry over to a future serving period, we're now measuring that as well. So it's just giving kitchens a better sense of how, you know, how their operation is running in terms of how much food they're producing, how much they're, you know, doing projections of how much they should be producing so they can reduce waste, you know, kind of optimize their operations. So that's what we're focused on. It's been pretty fun to get to work with both the bits and the atoms. So I've been really enjoying it so far.
Yeah, sweet. That's really where a lot of this stuff happens. I'm gonna launch a poll for a minute here to get an idea of the audience. What is your sort of connection to working in climate? Are you already working in climate as like a major part of what you do? Are you trying to get into it? Are you just curious? And then as that's happening, we now have 41 folks in the room. Pretty excellent. Thank you all for all those who joined late. Thanks for being here. I have a few requests for you. One is if you can turn on your video. That'll let us respond a little bit more organically to you. If you can't, that's totally fine. But it's more fun talking to a bunch of boxes with people in them than a bunch of boxes with names in them. And the other thing is this time is primarily for you all to get whatever you want out of these panelists and me. We're here for you. So we have the Q&A, the Zoom Q&A feature open. We also have the meeting chat open, and I'll be trying to monitor both of those with the Q&A feature. Of course, you can put in questions and then folks can upvote them, and then I can prioritize those that folks really want to know. So think about what you want to know from all these excellent folks. And in the meantime, while you're working on that, I want to ask David. You mentioned that part of what your driving force was like how aligned you felt with the work. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that has like driven your career or not at different points?
Yeah.
And then I want to hear from Karen then too.
Yeah.
At any point.
Yeah, I mean, I think for many years, as I said, like really enjoy software engineering. I think for kind of the first part of my career, it was just kind of focused on like what sound like interesting problems. So as I mentioned, like the startup studio that I worked with, like just had a chance to work on a lot of neat different domains. And then again, like I ended up at New Relic through a friend who I had actually worked with at the startup studio, and I was primarily driven by like looking for a good team to work with. I think that has always been like one of my primary things that I'm looking for in a new role, is just being able to work with good people. So definitely like I've been very fortunate to have that experience in my software career, but I think I felt that the software software runs basically everything today. So you can kind of work in essentially any domain and still, be a software engineer. So I think really kind of inspired by the layoff last year, I was like, okay, I want to keep writing software, but like, what kind of software? Like, what do I want to be the output of this that feels like it's having some impact that I can feel good about. So I think that was what really drove me to start looking into climate, because
I love how you described that as an opportunity when you were talking earlier.
Yeah, like you got to take opportunities in whatever form they end up appearing in. So yeah, and I mean, like as I started to kind of dig into it more, I mean, I was like so excited to find the Terra.do course. I think I found it through Climate Tech List. They had like a blog post there that mentioned the climate-based fellowship and the Terra.do learning for action fellowship. And I think when I went to Terra's website, I saw the software one, and that's when I was like, oh, yeah, like, okay. I mean, of course, I was like, yes, there have to be software roles in climate, but like here I can see, as Kara mentioned earlier, like the example projects you can see on there, like, look at all this cool stuff you can do. And yeah, it was just like a great way to get that introduction.
Open up the possibilities.
Yeah, and as Ben mentioned earlier, I also like the specific, the other fellowships kind of take the broad approach to like everything about climate, which at the time, since I was brand new, like that felt a little overwhelming for me. So I really enjoyed like the focus of the software for climate course, but being able to really dig in and be like, okay, I know software engineering, give me the concrete ways that I can apply this to climate solutions. And like, that's exactly what we did. So it was great. Yeah.
Cool. I don't want this to be too much of an advertisement for my course, but it is something that brings us what brought all four of us together. So that will probably come up a few times. But yeah, Ben and Kara, any other thoughts on like how mission has guided or not guided your career at different times?
Sure, I can jump in on that. I've always been driven by what I want to work on. That's pretty much dictated how I moved around throughout my career. And so early on, that looked like the coolest tech, right? I wanted to work on backend stuff. I wanted to work on the Java platform. I worked on multimedia messaging backends. How do those picture messages get to you? Like, what is this infra of the tech that makes our world work, right? And I worked on APIs. I wanted to design stuff that would scale. That was highly satisfying to me. After my mom started struggling with memory loss quite early in her life, it changed my perspective, and I ended up I had a startup for a couple of years, building technology to help older adults and connect with their loved ones and remain independent. That changed my career to give me more perspective around, product and technical program management, all the different aspects of things that it takes to do a business and a product, as well as just the tech. And so changed the shape of my career. And since then, I've been focusing in roles that are in some way tech for good. So I worked in accessibility at Google and at Amazon. I worked on, and also with startups, I worked on privacy for mergers and acquisitions at Google. But I worked on also the clinical trials at Verily, another Alphabet company, again, trying to have positive impact in the world. After coming to the decision that climate was just so existential that it's hard to really think about anything else, I looked for where do I fit? Where can I use what I know and what I have to have impact in the space? And that's where the grid felt like such a natural fit for me. It's almost the grid to me is almost like the back end of a service, right? The sound engine that runs like audio for the Java platform. It's like the multimedia message center that runs the back end of like multimedia messages, and those messages get to actual people out there in the field. The grid runs our electricity, and it ultimately delivers it to every single one of your outlets. So that infrastructural aspect of it was very attractive to me. So it combined my mission, my kind of natural inclinations, and my background.
You're not afraid of tackling the whole system, the whole complicated mess.
I would chime in from my perspective on this. Like, I maybe had a little bit different experience and motivation than David, in that I knew very early what domain I wanted to work in, and that originally was sports. And I was very lucky to work at the intersection of sports and data for 16 years, and before I was able to make the move over to the climate side, when that became a driving motivator for me. And I think that was something that for me, for the roles that I have been in on the data science and product management side, kind of the domain knowledge is a key part of being successful in those roles. I think that can be a little bit different for software engineering, and I'm not a software engineer, but I think it can vary a little bit kind of from role to role and within technology more broadly. And so for me, it was really important to get experience in the domain before I could make a leap over in this area. And that's where this course was really helpful, as I alluded before. And in fact, doing some of the projects in this course, like the final project that we did was I chose to do a study. I had a colleague or a partner on this project who we chose to study EV charging in a particular project around EV charging. And we got access to some data, and we did a pretty interesting project, and kind of learned a lot in the process. And then that turned into a advising opportunity, consulting opportunity with an EV charging data company, right? And so that helped me build even more kind of climate, energy, transportation, domain knowledge and expertise. And that, ultimately led to more credibility to move further into this space, I think. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. We have a question from Tillman here that's really getting into this question that I often hear of, like, how do I get into a software for climate career? And there's so many different parts of that. I'm like not even sure how to phrase it. But I feel like you guys have touched on so many important parts of that. Like, Kara, I love how you said, like, thinking about where my skills are and how they fit in. That's basically like the number one thing when somebody is having like a career consultation call with me. I'm like, where are you? What do you have? They're like, all I have is experience in food tech. And I'm like, okay, well, that differentiates you. So if you want to keep using those skills, you absolutely can. But if you want to, and then at the same time, if you want to get into something that's a little bit of a different mission, then think about where those intersect and just play with it. And what you did, Ben, in your project, I believe that was around the time that there were big news stories about EV chargers like going out in Chicago or whatever, and polar vortex conditions. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, that was exactly it. It was there were a lot of news stories out at the time about how the cold weather had impaired the ability of EV chargers, public chargers, and impacted people's ability to get a charge. And so there were stories about people who would sit for 72 hours at a charger waiting in line to try to recharge their car. And it was, about the challenges of the early EV charging industry and everything. So we wanted to look at the data of that. We wanted to look at across the country, how much did temperature affect kind of charging time and availability. And there were particular, it kind of came down to the charging stations themselves. You could look at individual charging stations where they were in use almost 24 hours for the day during those periods, because they were high traffic stations. And not only was there more demand for charging, but the charges were taking longer because batteries, when they're cold, just take longer to charge, just part of the physics of it. And so I think that helps the company that I advise for kind of consult with charging networks and other companies who are looking at installing chargers about where should we put in chargers? How can we be more robust to weather patterns and traffic patterns? Where is ultimately where are the charging sessions going to go? Where are drivers going to go when they want to charge their cars? And so really fascinating to look at the data there and explore all of the different variables and opportunities for improvement.
I think I remember you found that the charging sessions were longer, but like not that much longer, and reliability was lower, but not that much lower, which is
right. Yeah, on average, that's the case for sure. And it was definitely a gradient. Like we could see a drop off in performance if it was, if it was like 10 degrees colder than the previous week versus 20 degrees versus 30 degrees colder, you could see definitely a degradation there. So it, I think what made the news were some of the outlier cases with, individual charging stations. Of course, that's what tends to make the news, is the outliers, the exceptions. But yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And then like coming through it with the actual data is then what can drive actual like valuable changes.
100%.
Very cool. Okay. Have you all seen any, so the third part of this question is, well, actually the first part of this question, like how tight is the job market? Did you notice differences between career opportunity in climate versus not climate? And remote versus in-person work trends? Is there anything that you all picked up in your relatively recent job searches on that front? I know, like, as a bottom line, I want to acknowledge that like the job market is totally crazy right now. A lot of the standard channels for hiring are just completely saturated in like messed up AI slop. So it's tough out there, and you're not alone if that's what you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was focused specifically on climate and energy jobs myself, so I can't speak to how it compares to the broader market. I think it was definitely competitive. And, in my case, I went from a managerial role back to a senior IC role. It was a trade-off that I was willing to make in the transition, and was able to work with my family, make sure it was the right move for me, and decided that it was, and I have no regrets, certainly. I think, you mentioned AI in particular. I think this is something that what I've seen and read about, and what's worked in my case, is really just building that network so that you have people who can vouch for you and say, yeah, this is a real person. They do real work. This is not a fake candidate that looks good on paper, but when you actually hire them, if they make it through the process, then they're just gonna ghost you and they're not going to be productive. Like, that seems to be a real thing. I saw it a little bit at my previous job, and when we were hiring folks, we saw more and more candidates coming in like that. And so really just anything you can do to have a network through, build a network through courses like through Terra.do or other services like MCJ has an intros service that'll introduce you to people. There's a handful of them out there. Going to Climate Week events in your local areas, right? Like connecting with people on LinkedIn and then just striking up a chat. I have made several connections that way, frankly, and some of them have led to other opportunities. And you never know when those connections could lead to something. And any basic interaction and history you have with that person, then at least gives you some credibility if you need to go ask them for a favor later on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I feel like in the current market, and if you expect to be sending out your resume to like your 5 top places and then select from a suite of offers, exactly what you want, like that's not the way it's working right now. At the same time, being in software, I think is so much easier than changing from a lot of other roles, right? Your skills are so transferable. I think it's harder for people who are in roles where like business development or product is possible, but it's harder because the domain experience and the networks that they have in those areas are so important for doing the job. The domain experience is so important. People do it, but I think it's harder. In software, everything involves software. The software, everybody's hiring for software at some point. When they scale, they're definitely hiring for software. They probably use the same tools you use. They probably use use Jira, they probably use Agile sprints, or something close, to, something analogous. It's not that different. And then the networking, everyone working in climate cares, right? They're mission driven. They want to help people. There are all these ways to meet people who are in industry. There are the communities you can build through Terra and other learning communities. And then there's your existing network. Probably you already know people who have moved into some kind of climate job. Find those people, reach out to them. That's how I found my role. I saw that someone I had worked with in the past role at Verily was a Tapestry, and I was like, hey, I saw you're here. And he said, hey, we're hiring right now, right? So part of it, I think, also is just recognizing opportunity when it comes and knowing what you're looking for, so you recognize the opportunity when it's there. So for me, I hadn't really started my job search yet. I was still kind of getting ready to do that. But when this opportunity came along, I knew it was right because I knew I wanted to do the grid. I knew I loved the Alphabet ecosystem. The company was at the right stage where I felt like I could have a lot of impact. So and through the learning I had done, I knew enough of the acronyms, I knew enough about the grid. I was able to interview in a credible manner that showed that I wasn't just saying to this in this interview, hey, I'm into climate, and the next interview, hey, I'm into something else, but that I was really invested and committed to moving into this space, and all those things helped when the opportunity came. So I think being open to opportunity when you see it is also an important element.
Totally.
Yeah, I think I would echo everything Ben and Kara said. I think looking specifically for software engineering roles, like I found that I kind of did like two parallel searches when I was like searching for my job. It was like, okay, I primarily wanted to find a climate focused role. So like use specific job boards for that, but also use like LinkedIn job search just to see like what, software engineering roles sounded interesting to me. I wasn't even necessarily applying for those ones, but just to see like what was out there. And so like kind of with that broader like LinkedIn search, I think I found that like, climate specific roles, like they definitely showed up there, but they're a smaller percentage of the total jobs out there. So like you have to, look for them a little harder. But they are out there. I, ended up interviewing at a few places that didn't work out. And the role that I ultimately got, that I ended up getting through a recruiter that reached out on LinkedIn. And I think he had seen that, I had specifically posted about the work I was doing in the Software for Climate course, and had just put a little thing on my profile that was like, hey, I'm really looking to work on climate solutions. And I think he saw that. It's like, hey, I think you might be a great fit for Topanga. And then when I interviewed with Topanga, I think, as Kara mentioned, like, really it's a software engineering job. Like I didn't, in the course, we didn't really cover the food industry all that much. So like I didn't have any food service specific domain knowledge when I joined, but I did have all of the transferable software engineering skills. And I think what really resonated with Topanga was kind of that mission alignment. I wanted to work on a solution. They're building this solution. And so I think that's what really kind of like sealed the deal there. So yeah, I mean, what's been said so far, like, have that focus and look for opportunities that look like they're good to be a good fit. Update your LinkedIn profiles, because you never know, someone might reach out of the blue, and you'll find something. So
one more related question. Are there valuable skills in climate software that are different from software development roles in other industries? And actually, I think I want to make this more specific. Like, is there something in your role that you feel like you need to have that you didn't need to have in your non-climate roles? And yeah, and overall, how much of a percentage of your skills is that type of thing? And like, why do you need to know that? Why do you need to have that skill? Because I want to also make sure that we're mixing a little bit of like applications. Why are these things valuable in climate?
As a product manager, it is critical that I understand what our clients, we're a B2B business essentially, but B2B2C. So our clients and also their customers are doing in the energy space, right? So knowing how the electricity system works, knowing how, in my case, I'm managing a product now that's relates to how we handle solar customers. And so being a solar panel customer myself, I can identify with that. But if I wasn't, doing some research on how do solar rates vary across the country, understanding how PG&E in California pays you for your solar versus how PPL here in Pennsylvania pays you for your solar is, very specific knowledge that is something that I was reading up on. I was doing newsletters, I was listening to podcasts, and just trying to understand this specific energy space before I could get into this role. And it's serving me well already. I'm finding myself a head start in that area and picking up that knowledge. So I think, if you think of it in like a Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours kind of perspective, like think about how many hours you need to put in to kind of reach a level of expertise and what your role needs to be. And for the product side, a lot of that is domain knowledge. For software, it might be more transferable. If you put in your 10,000 hours in software engineering, that might be more transferable. So kind of depends on your role, I would say specifically, but definitely on the product side, there was domain knowledge I needed to pick up.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's all climate solutions tend to be kind of fractal in nature, especially in the United States with grids and municipalities and states and everybody having their different roles and ways they do things. The deeper you look, the more you find.
Yeah, I agree there. The domain experience or the domain knowledge is critical. You can build it, but it's integral to the work. At least that's been my experience. I think compared to other software roles at like big tech companies, it's so cross-functional. There are so many experts. There's deep expertise in particular elements of grid planning, for particular elements of how to operate, like buying and selling electricity is totally different than like planning is totally different than maintaining, it's totally different than reporting. So transmission, distribution, different worlds, related. So listening to a lot of podcasts and then just getting traction with what are the concepts, what are the words, helped a lot. Otherwise, people are saying stuff like ders and gets, and they almost sound like grunts. They barely even sound like words, but you better know if they're distributed energy resources or grid enhancing technologies, even to pick up what's being said. It helps to have some baseline in the vocabulary. And then there's so much of the grid related technology in at least in what we do. I think it would be hard to it would be a high bar. It would be a hard hill to climb if you didn't really care, right? If you're used to building where you're like, okay, great, I'll work for your company and we'll build like websites and it'll serve like the web pages about whatever, like really fast and really effectively and really reliably. We have great metrics, and continuous deployment, great, could be this or it could be that. But for electricity, we're looking at like very, very specific things where like the models are very detailed. We work intimately with power systems engineers who are a core part of our teams, right? Product manager, we have power systems, we have UX, we have Eng, right? Right together, working closely. And so the concepts that we're embodying are integral to the work. There are a lot of electrical diagrams. On my very first day, the tech lead sat me down and said, "Do you know what a feeder is?" Started drawing like poles and wires on the whiteboard, and we started right with the grid. Before we started with the, what is the code base? Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Learning is very fun.
That's another thing. Yeah, I love how you covered both sides of that. Like having the depth is so useful, and also everybody who hires you is aware that you're going to come in without every component that you need. David, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would echo that it is from what I'm seeing, like it is role specific, as I mentioned. Like I think my primary work I'm doing is like software engineering, a lot of transferable skills there, but there is always that domain specific knowledge. I think some of the things that I'm coming up on 3 months with Topanga, and like my first foray into the food service industry. And I think the things that I'm seeing so far is working really closely with our clients and understanding their workflows. So, you know, the working in kitchens it's obviously a very physical process, very fast paced. So the solutions that we're trying to develop, we are working very closely with these folks who are operating kitchens to figure out what's going to work for them so that they can like get this new level of visibility into their data that they never had before, but in a way that like isn't a big hindrance to their workflow. Ideally, it's like it's a better experience. Like instead of having to fill out paperwork sheets where you're, you know, recording all the weights of what you're, you know, what you have left over at the end of the day, you just throw it on the scale, hit one button, it does it all automatically, and you move on. So that's what we're hoping to get to. But we really want to make sure that what we build like fits into the workflow of our clients. So that's one thing. I think another thing is, you know, kind of with the bits and atoms piece, the project I'm working on like is something where we have physical pieces to it. So I do get the chance to work more with the hardware side too, which you don't always get a chance to when you're working in software. And I've had, you know, some experience with hardware here and there over the years, but that's another piece that can come into play. So if you want to like work more with the Atom side of things, you know, getting some of that hardware experience is a great skill set to have. And again, not to advertise the course, but I just really enjoyed the course. But like that's another piece too. We got to play with hardware. I still have like the sensors sitting on my desk here that we used in the course. So yeah, if you're into like bridging that gap between the digital world and the physical world, climate is the perfect place to do it.
Yeah, that is the reason that we do that in the course, because like one of our not so secret motive with the course was like to draw a lot of people in the big tech industry to like and make them feel more prepared to do things in the climate space. And the climate is a problem of atoms ultimately. Like there's interfaces between the software world and the real world that most applications require. Oh, this is a fun one. Oh, actually, I wanted to thank Tillman. That was a great series of questions, even though you asked them all at the same time in one thing. I just wanted to do them all because I feel like that was exactly what's on a lot of folks' minds right now. Question in the chat from Divya is, how are your organizations handling this moment with regard to hiring and role descriptions with climate and sustainability words in them? I think beyond that, other than hiring, is there any other way that you feel like your organizations are reorienting themselves with the current political climate, let's say? Or if that's not part of your work, then that's maybe not.
I don't know. I'll take a stab at this. I don't know that we have done a lot. I don't know that we've changed a lot of what we've done. But we've also, you know, Oracle Utilities, the utilities division is focused on energy and utilities. And so it's not trying to brand itself as climate or sustainability, like on the surface anyways. You know, we have a big, you know, climate, energy efficiency, like solar, DERs, like aspect to what we do in supporting utilities there. But I think our brand is just not climate specific, right? And so maybe an interesting point or something that I didn't really appreciate necessarily when I was doing a climate job search. I did the type in climate product jobs, right, in LinkedIn, and you just get this whole list and you apply to dozens of them, and then none of them you ever hear back from, right? I think what helped me was finding a more eventually finding my way to a more targeted sector and set of companies that I wanted to work for. And then regardless of how they branded themselves or described themselves in their job descriptions or anything like that, you know, kind of zero in on those, try to make connections at those places and kind of get a foot in the door that way, and be a little bit more narrowly focused and go deeper with those opportunities, regardless of, you know, whether they have climate in the job description or whether it's just an energy job or a food and agriculture job that happens to have a climate angle to it. So that's one thing I'd encourage folks to kind of think about how you're approaching your search there. Even if you are motivated by climate first and foremost, the jobs are not necessarily branded that way.
Yeah. While we're continuing to think about this question, I want to just point out that we have about 12 minutes left. Actually, sorry, exactly 12 minutes left. I was going to say about 10, but then I was an engineer, so I said 12. We have 3 questions in the Q&A here. We probably won't have time to get to all of them. So if you want to go in and vote on them, that's this is a great time to do that, so that we can make sure that we're talking about the things that folks want to hear about. Okay, any other questions on terms and political climate and how your organizations are approaching them?
I think that the problems are real and they're not politically dependent. So we can talk about things like how to increase capacity, grid reliability, making better decisions. The need for none of that, all of that is very clear and is independent of the some of the other things that are going on in the world right now. We all need a grid that meets our needs.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was just gonna add like a perspective from another domain. So like this is a thing that like does seem kind of domain specific. And it's maybe also, I mentioned earlier, like our primary clients are colleges and universities, and they're experiencing some like really interesting and unique turbulence right now in terms of like their funding sources. And so like they have seen issues with presenting things to kind of stakeholder, like the financial gatekeepers, presenting those as like sustainability initiatives, like gets kind of a more critical eye on it. So I think something that we've been having to try to do is position things not so much as sustainability focused, but like just operational efficiency. Like this should be a positive return on investment because you're optimizing your operation. So we have to kind of like position it that way. And the fact that like you are, having a positive impact on climate by, using less food, that just happens to be kind of like a side effect of what we're doing. I think internally, like it's still a primary goal for us at Topanga, but in terms of like how it has to get presented to clients and financial gatekeepers has shifted a bit over the past several months, which has been interesting to see.
Yeah, totally. Okay, looks like I had the Q&A configured incorrectly, so you couldn't actually see each other's questions. Should be able to see each other's questions now. Yeah, I think I love that David's and Kara's answers are like the perfect 2 halves of the answer of this question. I think that actually goes back much further than like the current administration. I think climate has always had a problem with orienting all of its messaging towards, or a lot of its messaging towards, the people who really care about climate. And the reality is there aren't that many people who are looking to like make sacrifices for climate or like make product choices based on climate. Not that is a substantial portion of the population, but if you want to reach everybody, we've always had this problem of like, you're doing something that's smart, that can just make everybody's lives easier, that can make things more effective, that can make things cheaper, that can make your homes more comfortable. And if you orient it as like, yeah, but all these molecules in the atmosphere, you're going to lose 80% of people before your actual product pitch. And so this is a bit of like a crucible of like, yeah, we are like, reality is we are losing a lot of progress in places that matter, that can't easily be pivoted towards other messaging. Like my company, Option Zero, has had numerous contracts just sort of disappear that we don't really know why. If anything, could just be because federal government organizations are less effective now because they just had a bunch of people effectively randomly fired. Like regardless of the messaging and the output of our actual thing. So there's a lot more to unpack there, but let's drop back to the Q&A for a minute. couple of upvotes on Thurman's question here, which is, how has agentic AI, I think you're referring to probably like large language models that can do things like write code or order pizzas or whatever, affected software development in your company and for you personally? I'll actually take this one first because so my business, my wife and my partner Jamie are the two of us who run this course, who run our consultancy Option Zero. And a lot of what I do, both to be on top of this course and to be like an agile, effective consultant, is try to be on top of lots of different tools. And I am a huge fan of coding with AI assistance. I think it makes me more effective, but it also sometimes doesn't help at all and just burns a lot of energy. Jamie sits next to me over here, which is why I'm gesturing in this direction, and she's been sticking with mostly her old ways, and she's like really effective still. So it's been fun to feel that tension in our like in my working life. And what else? Like I've also had numerous jobs where like that couldn't have been done without large language models being what they are. I have built a chatbot to help people connect in climate spaces that wasn't possible before. Anything that involves unstructured data or semi-structured data and trying to like wrangle that, which would have previously taken an army of 10,000 interns, can now take an army of 10,000 digital interns, is actually a good application. And there's a lot of things in the regulatory and grid space that are like that, where like the data is there, but it's locked up in 100,000 PDFs. And a lot of what the climate solutions world needs to do is sort of review everything and see what can be substantially optimized. And a lot of what AI can do is sort of the same thing. It can take problems and change what's easy and what's hard and flip things on their head. It basically, in a word, it sort of unlocks the ability to reorganize things, which is crazy. It's like it can shift paradigms in lots of places. We don't know entirely yet where it's effective and where it's a waste of time. And that fact itself will also change changing constantly as the tooling changes. But let's just say like it's an exciting time. And I think it's worth paying attention to. Anything else to add there? I get excited about this stuff.
We certainly take an AI-driven approach. I think it has a role to play in software development and the development of models and how quickly we can train them or how effectively, and then also in products. I think, when you talk about like thousands or millions of PDFs, that kind of describes the situation with the interconnection queue and all these applications, and I really like the way you said how it changes what's easy and what's hard. And when you have these complex systems with many, many parts, you always have to figure out like where to focus. What are the problems that are going to be the most impactful, that are tractable or can be made tractable, and like who is the right entity to pursue those. Like at Tapestry, we take on bigger problems. Like we'll lean in on things that are harder to solve, and AI is a big part of that.
Okay, one more question from Noel. How common is it for companies in the space to hire independent consultants or freelancers? What do they look for in that kind of engagement? What sort of challenges are they more likely to try to solve with external help versus full-time staff? Does anybody else want to take a first answer at that? Yeah, David.
I'll just say, like, I haven't been super involved in like the decisions around this, but I will say that like I know at Topanga at least we have several contractors who work with us. So it's I think, you know, kind of along the same lines of our hiring discussion earlier. I think they're looking for the domain knowledge and the mission alignment. But yeah, so I don't think it is out of, I would say from what I've seen, it is not out of the question for contract roles to be out there. I feel like I've seen several of them also advertised in the Terra.do Slack and the Work on Climate Slack. I think there are a lot of contract and freelance roles in the climate space from what I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I do primarily. And it's helped for me to have a deep background in a wide variety of climate solutions, so that I can, like Kara was saying, speak the language. I feel like there's a moment in conversations where for a substantial part of my job, working the class and working my consulting things, I just like try to keep on top of things and talk to people and network, even though I've never thought of myself as somebody who would do that. And the point at which the conversation switches from just a conversation about what you're doing, what your problems are, what you're excited about, transitions to like a potential job for me is when they find out that I have a skill that they don't have, right? I need to be a consultant or a contractor. You want to bring something that they don't have. Maybe sometimes it's just extra bandwidth and like really good work ethic and really good communications. And then in climate, it's like that tends to also be like smart ideas about and a deep, quick understanding of what their problems are and how they might be solved.
I think that the domain knowledge, like you know, if it's power systems or ML or data science, you know, that can be really relevant. But also not necessarily speaking from the Tapestry perspective, or you know, but just generally, climate is full of startups. Like you know, this is like there are so many startups in almost every different sector that they're not always going to be ready to commit to hiring employees. So I imagine that just having the capacity even for a few months to take on a project and explore is important. It's, you know, got to be a source of opportunities to get a foot in.
Yeah, ultimately the difference between full-time and contractor is often just a matter of commitment. Like I can start work on something next week and then you can fire me a month later, and that's totally fine with everybody. Because that's what I do. Well, not get fired. I usually try to complete the project. We are past time. That got right past me there. But thank you all so much for coming. I dropped our LinkedIns in the chat. If you want to connect with us, that's the best way to do it. There's also a link to the software for, oh, that's not the software for climate class. That's my LinkedIn again. That's the class. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.